Thank you so much for joining us for another version of our well-being webinars this summer. Today is going to be all about the manager's well-being, because this is a subject that we've been following very closely over a year now. And I would love to take you through the data that we've collected over the past couple of months now, and historical data of the past 3 years, and then tell you a little bit more about what's like managers are doing in your organizations today. So the webinar is called the Why Now and How Now. Which is exactly why I will start the now of this question about like managers' well-being, and then what to do about improving managers' well-being in today's webinar. And this will take about like 20, I would say 20 to 30 minutes of your time. So with that, let's just start. So when you look at the world, as you all know, most of the central banks have printed a lot of money throughout COVID, and after COVID, we've seen a huge shrinkage of money, of course, because we did not continue printing money, which meant that most of the countries that we're looking at today, meaning the US, the EU, the UK, are going through either flats or recession times. Of course, unfortunately, added to the devaluation, the inflation crisis, we also have the energy crisis that's going on in the EU, and that's looking to continue like up until, I would say, Q1 of 2024, which is not great news, I know. But we have to, like, of course, it's not going to be the same as 2023, by the way. It's not going to be like the 2023 summer, but most analysts argue that if it's a very cold winter in 2024, we're highly likely to see a similar energy crisis, not with the same impact, the same economic impact, because like most of the countries have adjusted their energy prices, have adjusted their suppliers, but it's still on the table. And of course, on top of that, like it's not just these two issues, right? Like we're also dealing with other upcoming unfortunately crises. I don't want to be the doomsayer here, but like this is everything that's been impacting our economies. And since our economies are impacted by this, they also impact directly the business and the managers specifically, because they're the ones with the most responsibility on their shoulders, and most they brace most of the impact that this economic impact creates on the economies. So what am I talking about here? So the US for 2023, it looks like it's going to be like a 1 to 2% growth, tops, if it's not like a flat. So in the UK, still it looks like to be in the minuses of growth. In the EU, very similar. We're also seeing like flat growth or like 0.5 growth. In MENA, interestingly, like last year we saw 7% growth. This year it's going to be closer to 3%. Next year it's foreseen to be similar. Of course, you can't predict like a complete year ahead, but it looks like it's going to stay the same for MENA as well. Asia is about the same, 5 to 6% growth was happening in 2022. It looks like it's going to shrink this year, so it's going to be about 2 to 3% growth. So of course, like we also have the AI in place. Like it looks like we're going to have other stuff on our plate in the upcoming months and years, and that creates a lot of stress, right? Like this is a Gallup survey done with over 3,000 people on average every single year. And what you can see is like the stress level of overall employees, I'm not talking about managers here, started from about like 25% of employees, and now it's a little over 40%. So the increase here has been a lot, like almost 20 to 25% more people are now stressed daily when you look at your employees today. So that asks for a change, right? Like change in employee well-being and also managers' well-being. Why? I started this webinars by saying like, talking you through all of the crises that the world is going through at the moment in terms of economic impact, and that's impacting mostly the managers because they're toast, right, between what the top management wants and what the employees actually demand from them. Interestingly enough, though, their well-being is probably maybe the top thing you need to look at when you're looking at employee well-being overall. Why? I love the statistic because it says, according to 69% of people, their managers had the greatest impact on their mental health, on par with the impact of their partner. Which is absolutely, phenomenal, right? Like managers really have a huge impact overall on your team's well-being in general. When you look at it, and like we've recently done a huge survey with PwC on the S in ESGs. And we've done this in 5 different countries. We've looked at the US, we've looked at the UK, the EU, and some MENA countries. And when we've finalized this survey, what we've seen is, interestingly, what affects what affects employee well-being the most are 2 things, like psychological safety first, and then inclusive management and supportive leadership. And they have an effect on employee well-being in different ways. Psychological safety is the #1 indicator of how positive effects, or like how many positive days your employees are likely to experience at work. And inclusive management and supportive leadership have this effect of increasing the number of negative effects. In other words, the number of days where people are not feeling great. So because of this, like they're almost like 2 sides of an equilibrium, and you need to have a look at on both things. And it's the same for managers as well. When you're looking at managers' well-being, which seems to be the most important thing when it comes to your overall corporate employee well-being, there it also starts with psychological safety and inclusive management and supportive leadership. Why? So let me start with this. When you look at well-being as a general approach, you will see that well-being has 2 sides, right? When you're talking about well-being, you're talking about people who have negative effect, right? Like people who are talking about anxiety, depression, like not being able to get up, not being able to like participate in daily activities, for example. Like this is, I would say, like if you look at this almost as a scale, this is the negative part of the scale. And in order to have employees, you have to, like, if you have that kind of workforce, you first have to, of course, focus on the negatives to try to alleviate these problems. And then you can only then have a look at the positive side of things, right? Some people call this the positive psychology, but it really has 2 sides, right? Like once you have alleviated all of these like negative sides of people by helping them through, it can be various different initiatives here, like it could be therapy, it could be group therapy, it could be like a very personalized approach, it could be trainings. But like after you alleviate those problems, you're not left with people who are thriving still. You have people who are neutral, who are not complaining about their life, or who don't have maybe depression or anxiety or similar symptoms, but you're left with neutral people. You're not left with thriving people, which is why you need to focus on that side as well. And as I said, like our ESG's report talks about this in depth, but there are 2 things at work that you can have a look at when you want to eliminate those problems, which is inclusive management and supportive leadership. If you think you're lacking in that area, like inclusive management and supportive leadership, it's the #1 place you can start having a look at if you want to improve your manager's well-being. And then on the other hand, on the other side of the equilibrium, when you're looking at improving people's well-being, you can have a look at psychological safety. And let's just remind ourselves what psychological safety was, which is very simple, actually. It's being able to say what you think without having the fear of being of being let go of your position or your job, or not being included, or of not being loved. So if you can freely express your opinion about work, then that's psychological safety. And then it exists actually in pockets in organizations. Like, you can't talk about a general psychological safety. Like, you can't say the organization that has high psychological safety. I mean, you can say that on average, but there are going to be pockets, because pockets are concentrated around managers. So let's have a look at what's happening with managers today. So managers are not feeling extremely well at the moment. Call again later. So this is a Deloitte analysis here, and I will shortly combine that with our analysis as well, Bees. But what we're seeing is, like, employees are definitely more stressed and more exhausted. But like, when you look at the C-suite, you're seeing that, like, the top managers are feeling more overwhelmed, more lonely, and more depressed than your overall, like, the rest of your teams. And when you look at our data as well, Bees, and what you're looking at here is exactly that. This has been going on not just this past year. This has been going on for 3 years now. So our data for the past 3 years, on the bar graph with non-managers compared with the green graph with the managers, you're seeing that historically managers have always been feeling less well than their teams. They're also losing sleep. Like, when you look at this data again for the past 3 years now, you're seeing a very similar picture here. You're seeing that team members are sleeping better than their manager counterparts. And this has been going on for over 3 years now, as I said. And there tends to be, if you look at this graph closely, you will see that there are ups and downs. And most of the time, these downs happen around wintertime. So wintertime for, of course, the northern part of the hemisphere. So January, February, March, you're seeing smaller downturns of managers' well-being and managers' sleep, especially. So these, like, all of these, like, economic crises that I mentioned all the way in the beginning, they really are taking a toll on your managers. So if you're seeing a lot of your managers being burned out, or like if you're hearing them like resign from their jobs, like, it's not a big coincidence that this is happening. This is real. I mean, the data shows that this has been going on for a while now, and we all know where this is leading, right? Like, if you keep on feeling not well over and over and over again, and if you're like met with crises over and over and over again, after a point you start not feeling anything. So in some cases it might lead to depression, where you're like, like, let me just not, of course this is not happening as simplistic as that, but like, if this is continuous, and if the crises happen over and over again, this could lead into depression at some point. So or like apathy, or like losing interest in work. So these are all things that I'm sure that you're seeing at work as well. Why is that so important? Because when you look at these numbers as well, you will see that their well-being, managers' well-being. I also showed other data about this in the beginning of this webinar. It is extremely correlated to their team's well-being. So it's not just the Gallup data, it's not the like Willis Towers Watson data, not just the Deloitte data that I've been showing to you these past couple of slides, but also when you look at these numbers, you will see that managers' well-being correlates to their teams. So you're looking at 5 different companies here to the right, and you will see that the whites are the managers' well-being in this case, and managers' well-being tends to be only like differentiated by their team's well-being by 5%. So if let's say your managers are feeling in average 4 out of 5, there's no way that your teams are feeling anywhere beyond or below 4.05 or 3.95, which is very shocking and interesting. Then there's the Schadenfreude parts, and we would we're looking at this very closely in some companies as well. We're seeing this like cross correlation. So once managers feel better, non-managers tend to feel worse, or vice versa. So we've seen this trend in some companies, but not in others. So this is another thing that we need to look at, and we believe this comes from the psychological safety aspect that I've told you about in the beginning of this call. So what's going to happen, right? Like, what's the next step? And is it really all gloom and doom? We don't believe so. So we believe it all starts with measuring. I mentioned to you like that there are psychological safety pockets. We can start measuring with that. But like measuring overall, like especially if you're in an enterprise organization, measuring is going to be key. Like, is this happening in my organization as well? Or is it only happening in pockets? If not, like, is this a trend? Or maybe is this something that's just happening this month? So with as well, because you've seen like that with the trend that I've shown in the past 3 years, we can measure something like this. You can also do this without a platform. Of course, you can always do this with a survey as well. Always remember, this is contagious. What do I mean by that? So the managers will impact the team and vice versa. So when you're measuring for well-being, you need to measure both sides, and you need to remember where the problem is, right? Like I mentioned to you, you need to have a look at the negative side first to see if there are any problems to be dealt with. If not, you can always go back and have a look at the positive psychology side. But when you're measuring, when you're seeing how people are doing, you also need to understand, like, if they're not well, why they're not well, right? And then we should always know, like, once you've measured, just know that this is extremely contagious. Like, maybe I'll just mention to you Harvard Business, not Harvard Business Review, sorry, Harvard University research that took place for over 20 years with over 2,000 people over their course of life. And it's just been shown, and this is not the one survey that's showing this, like there are so many different research that shows the same thing over and over again. The 5 people closest to you affect how you feel more than anything else in this world. So your social connections affect how you're feeling today. So managers' well-being, what really affects that? Number one, training. When and if you introduce well-being trainings, specifically target your managers. So like, you've measured it, you know how they're feeling, you know where they're lacking, you know where the problems are, then like start by doing the training. Interestingly enough, from our SNESG survey, we've seen that training is the one thing that positive affect the most. So if you're like if you started by measuring how managers are feeling, and if it looks like they don't have these like negative effect problems, but the positive effect side is lacking, you can start by trainings. Inclusive management, I talked about this in the beginning, but if you're one of those organizations that's on the other side of the spectrum, where there's a lot of negative effect with managers, start by looking like if these managers do feel included, if they feel like they can vulnerably talk about their problems, if there are enough like examples out there that are talking vulnerably about like employee well-being, if yes, like underline their importance. This is going to quickly improve the problems on the negative side, I would say. Remember, managers as well as employees, all social animals here, like and like this has been proven over and over again. I don't want to go into too much research here, but for example, Wellbees is built on um social determination theory, and I'm sorry, self-determination theory and self-determinate. There's a billion research out there with the lens of self-determination theory, that's talking about how social connectivity helps with well-being, and it's like one of the pillars of that's contributing to well-being a lot. And when you see, like when you look at this data here, you will see that the more people connect socially, the better they feel, and the difference is sometimes like 20 to 30%. And our data shows us, we know as well-bees, that before someone resigns, their mood drops by up to 20%. So socializing among their peers might mean that a manager might stay or go. And this is especially important for psychological safety, right? We've seen that the number one, the biggest change in psychological safety happens once people socialize outside of work. So if you can get managers to socialize outside of work, this can be online on a platform like Wellbees, where people are talking about their interests, on a club, on an event, or it can be on site. For example, like I always love to give this example. We've done a Wellbees challenge of posting photos of managers as they were kids, and people were like reacted in such funny ways, you know. And there was one comment, I will never forget it. It said, my manager was a child once upon a time. So it really creates those connections and builds that psychological safety. I know this was a very simple example, but simple is good, like simple creates those changes. Just know that again, when it comes to managers' well-being, when you've seen that the problem lies more with the positive side than the negatives, just know that some habits and under the well-being spectrum are more powerful than others. We've seen that those managers who take care of themselves physically, like who work out, who drink a lot of water, who sleep well, tend to feel so much better mood-wise, so much better, meaning anywhere between 22 to 26% better than others who don't. It's the chicken and egg problem, right? But if you can like get examples out there who are doing this, who are taking care of themselves, and make them into examples, you're likely to win some managers who are not feeling great at the moment. And again, vulnerability. This is a big topic. If you have a manager that's vulnerable, that's very contagious. If you can get that person under the spotlight, if you can get that person to talk about it, if you can get maybe any other managers to talk the way they are talking, it will be perfect, because it all starts with that vulnerability, with that safe space. It creates that psychological safety as well around it. Also, habits. Habits are super important. And if you feel like some manager has those habits that you need, that is, you know, that is really helping their well-being, you can put them as examples and you can really put them under the spotlight. And building the vocabulary is very important. If you, if you don't use the words to express or talk about well-being, it will be very difficult to do so for managers and from their managers to their teams as well. So if you can build a vocabulary around that, like there are several different organizations that do that. For example, on Wellbees, we have Mondays Club. On the Mondays Club, people ask themselves how they are really. So they end it with the really, and everybody knows what that really means, right? Like, and they share again, vulnerably, what they've been doing this past weekend, if they felt any anxiety on Sunday coming in on Monday. So creating that vocabulary online or offline is very crucial to create managers, or like help managers with their well-being. And maybe this is one of the most important things I would say, but if possible, if you see any interest from one of the managers that you have on board around well-being. You can make them a cheerleader around all of the work that you're doing. They don't need to be called an well-being ambassador. They can simply support all of the work that you're doing around well-being, and they can be your messenger. So for example, we have this one CEO in an energy company who's cycling to work all the time, and he's huge on cycling, right? Like he loves it and he challenges everyone. So on Wellbees, we have challenges. He literally challenges everyone in the company to go out there to cycle with him. He creates challenges, like step challenges, to see like if anybody else can like win him to it. And this creates such a huge safe space. And I've been told, for example, by one of the factory workers of the CEO, that he is visible now, and that makes him feel so empowered and so happy, which comes back to the reward and recognition part, right? But simple things, social connections, be it online, be it offline, and making like these well-being prone managers visible is going to make a huge difference. So I hope this helped with some of the issues that you're facing at work around your manager's well-being today. There's no one simple solution or one simple formula that will fix everything, but I hope this has given you some ideas. On LinkedIn, I also shared some of our data in a written form if you're interested in that. Please do reach out to us if you would like to read some of our SNESG's report that we have done with PwC that I mentioned a couple of times during this webinar. If there are questions now, I would love to take them. Let's see. All right, no questions so far. You know where to reach us, either on LinkedIn or wellbees.co. And if you would like to have a call with me to discuss managers' well-being in your organization, I will be extremely happy to hop on a call and talk you through it. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today, and have a wonderful rest of the week.